Life in the circus was anything but ordinary. By day, I painted my face with bright colors and donned the oversized shoes that defined my act. I was John, the clown, master of laughter and silliness. But when the lights dimmed and the audience's cheers faded, my mind wandered to a place both thrilling and forbidden. I dreamed of Stacey, my wife, and the star gymnast, embracing a freedom that only existed in my fantasies. Our circus was a microcosm of unique individuals, a family bound by the rhythm of performances and the allure of the spotlight. Among them was Tom, the towering strongman, a 2-meter-tall giant whose strength and charisma commanded attention wherever he went. His deep laughter resonated through the tents, and his presence was magnetic. I often found myself imagining Stacey in his orbit, her slender frame contrasted against his massive form. The thought alone sent a shiver through me, a mix of jealousy and excitement that I couldn't quite explain. Stacey and I were newly married, our bond solidified by years of partnership both on and off the stage. She knew my heart better than anyone, yet I had kept this peculiar desire to myself. How could I share something so unconventional, so risky? And yet, the thought of her, radiant and confident, sharing herself with Tom or any of the others, thrilled me beyond reason. It started with small inklings, moments when I caught her laughing with Tom during rehearsals or noticed the way he admired her acrobatic grace. I couldn't help but wonder, what if she could experience more? What if she could indulge in the admiration she deserved, not just from me but from the entire troupe? One evening, as we sat together in the quiet of our caravan, I decided to take the leap. Stacey reclined on the small sofa, her legs tucked beneath her as she sipped a cup of tea. Her hair, still damp from her post-performance shower, framed her face in loose waves. "Stacey," I began hesitantly, "have you ever thought about what it would be like to explore something outside of us? Just as an experiment?" She looked up, her brows knitting in curiosity. "What do you mean, John?" I swallowed hard, my palms damp. "I mean, if you were with someone else. Not in a way that replaces what we have, but as an adventure. A way to, I don't know, feel more alive." Her eyes widened, but not with shock. There was something else, an intrigued glint that I hadn't expected. "You're serious?" "Yes," I admitted, my voice steadying as I saw her open-mindedness. "I trust you, Stacey. I trust us. This isn't about betrayal, it's about freedom and trust. And I think it would excite me to see you in that way." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Stacey set her cup down and leaned closer to me, her eyes searching mine. "That's a bold thought, John. And you're saying you'd be okay with it?" I nodded. "Not just okay. I think it would make me proud. To know you're desired, to see you shine in someone else's eyes." A smile spread across her lips, slow and thoughtful. "You're something else, John. But if we're going to do this, it has to be on our terms, together." My heart swelled with gratitude and anticipation. "Absolutely. Together." We spent the rest of the night talking about boundaries and possibilities, our conversation charged with excitement. Stacey, ever the adventurous spirit, suggested that we start with someone we both knew and trusted. It didn't take long for Tom's name to come up. By the time we turned in for the night, my mind was ablaze with images of what might unfold. I lay beside Stacey, her breathing steady and peaceful, while I stared at the ceiling, consumed by a blend of nervousness and exhilaration. This was the beginning of something extraordinary. A journey into uncharted territory, fueled by love, trust, and a spark of daring. As I drifted to sleep, one thought echoed in my mind: I was ready to see Stacey in a new light. And I couldn't wait to take the next step. The following days passed in a haze of anticipation. Stacey and I had opened a door to something new, and now every interaction seemed imbued with unspoken excitement. We carried on with our acts, me juggling, tumbling, and making the crowd laugh, while Stacey defied gravity with her elegant routines. But backstage, the dynamic had shifted. It was as if a secret world existed just for the two of us, full of possibility. Stacey was radiant as ever, her confidence blossoming in ways I hadn't seen before. She knew the power she held, not just as a gymnast but as a woman who could command attention. She began to play with that power in subtle ways, a sly smile here, a playful wink there. And I noticed it wasn't just directed at me anymore. Tom, the strongman, remained unaware of the role he was about to play in our lives. He was a marvel of a man, his presence as massive as his physique. His booming laughter echoed through the tent, a sound that carried strength and warmth. Whenever he spoke to Stacey, his deep voice seemed to wrap around her, pulling her into his orbit. And Stacey, my beautiful Stacey, responded with a grace that made my heart race. One evening after the show, as the crew dismantled the big top, Stacey and I lingered by the performance area. Tom was there too, shirtless after his act, his dark skin glistening with a sheen of effort. He was chatting with a few of the crew members, his voice carrying easily over the din. "John," Stacey whispered, nudging me. Her eyes were locked on Tom, a mischievous glint in them. "What do you think?" My stomach flipped, but I steadied myself. This was the moment I had dreamed of, and now it was closer than ever. "He's perfect," I said, my voice low but certain. She smiled knowingly and took my hand. "Let's test the waters." Later that night, as we sat in our caravan, Stacey revealed her plan. "I'll start by spending more time with him," she said, her tone casual but her eyes alive with excitement. "Get to know him better, see where his boundaries are. And I'll keep you in the loop every step of the way." The idea both thrilled and terrified me. I trusted Stacey implicitly, but this was uncharted territory. Still, I nodded. "Just promise me one thing," I said. "Anything. Don't hold back. Be yourself. If this happens, I want it to be real." Her smile softened, and she leaned in to kiss me. "You're incredible, John. I don't know how I got so lucky." In the days that followed, Stacey began spending more time with Tom. At first, it was innocent, casual conversations during rehearsal breaks, shared laughs over meals in the dining tent. But I could see the shift in their dynamic. She was opening herself up to him, allowing their connection to deepen. And Tom, oblivious to my involvement, was clearly smitten. I watched from the sidelines, my heart pounding with every stolen glance and every shared laugh. Jealousy lurked in the corners of my mind, but it was quickly eclipsed by something more potent: pride. Stacey was magnetic, and I was witnessing her in a new light. She was flourishing, and it was breathtaking. One evening, as we sat together in our caravan, Stacey shared an update. "Tom's interested," she said, her cheeks flushed. "We were talking after rehearsal, and he asked if I'd like to grab a drink with him sometime." "And what did you say?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rapid thudding of my heart. "I said yes. But only if you're okay with it." The air between us crackled with tension. "I'm more than okay with it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to." She leaned back, her smile radiant. "Then it's settled. Tomorrow night, I'll meet him at the bar." That night, as Stacey slept beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing. The thought of her with Tom, her laughter, her smile, her touch, all of it played in my head like a vivid dream. I imagined her standing close to him, his massive form towering over her, his deep voice drawing her in. And I imagined her leaning into him, her eyes alight with excitement. It was intoxicating. The next evening, Stacey dressed with deliberate care. She chose a form-fitting red dress that accentuated her figure, paired with heels that gave her an extra edge of confidence. Her hair was styled in loose waves, and her makeup was subtle yet striking. "How do I look?" she asked, turning to face me. "You're stunning," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Tom won't know what hit him." She laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Wish me luck?" "You don't need it," I said. "You're irresistible." As she left the caravan, my heart swelled with a mix of pride and anticipation. This was it, the beginning of something I had long dreamed of. I stayed behind, my thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. I imagined the scene unfolding, Stacey meeting Tom at the bar, their conversation flowing easily, their connection deepening. When she returned hours later, her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes sparkled with excitement. "How was it?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. "It was incredible," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "He's so attentive, so charming. We talked for hours. And he kissed me. My breath caught, and a surge of emotion swept through me. How did it feel? Her smile widened, and she stepped closer, cupping my face in her hands. It felt amazing. But nothing compares to coming back to you. I pulled her into a kiss, my heart pounding. The thought of her with Tom had been exhilarating, but this, her return to me, her love for me, was the most powerful feeling of all. As we lay in bed that night, she shared every detail of their evening, her words vivid and full of life. I hung on every word, savoring the image of her happiness. This was just the beginning, and I couldn't wait to see what came next. The morning after Stacey's first evening with Tom, I woke to the soft sound of her breathing beside me. Sunlight filtered through the small window of our caravan, casting golden streaks across her face. She looked serene, her lips slightly parted, and her hair a mess of waves against the pillow. My heart swelled with love and admiration. She was mine, yet she carried the spark of something more now, a light that was both thrilling and humbling to witness. The memory of her words from the night before came flooding back. Her descriptions of Tom, his charm, and the way he had kissed her filled my mind. It felt surreal but exhilarating, like a story that was both ours and not ours at the same time. Stacey had opened the door to a new chapter, and I was ready to step through it with her. When she finally stirred, her eyes fluttering open, she smiled sleepily. "Good morning," she murmured, her voice warm and soft. "Good morning," I replied, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "How are you feeling?" "Still glowing," she said with a laugh, stretching lazily. "Last night was unforgettable." We spent the morning talking in hushed tones, our words intimate and full of shared excitement. Stacey told me more about her time with Tom, the way he had listened intently as she spoke about her life, the way he had complimented her strength and grace as a gymnast, and the way his deep laughter had made her feel at ease. It was clear she had enjoyed every moment, and hearing her speak so openly only deepened my pride and fascination. That day at the circus, I saw them together again, this time with new eyes. Stacey moved through her routines with her usual effortless elegance, but there was something different now, a confidence that seemed to radiate from her. And Tom, ever the charismatic strongman, watched her with a subtle intensity that hadn't been there before. Their connection was palpable, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. During rehearsals, I noticed how their interactions had shifted. Tom was more attentive, his smiles lingering a fraction longer, his compliments more personal. And Stacey responded with ease, her laughter ringing out like a melody. To the others in the troupe, it was simply a budding friendship. But I knew better. This was the foundation of something deeper. Later that evening, as we prepared for bed, Stacey broached the topic again. "Tom wants to see me," she said, her voice steady but tinged with anticipation. "He asked if I'd meet him tomorrow after the show." I felt my heart quicken, but I nodded. "What do you want to do?" "I want to go," she admitted, her eyes searching mine. "But only if you're okay with it." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Stacey, this is what we agreed on. I want you to enjoy yourself, to feel free. And I trust you." Her smile was radiant, and she leaned in to kiss me. "I love you, John. More than anything." The next day, I watched her prepare with the same care as before. This time, she chose a sleek black dress that clung to her in all the right places, paired with silver heels that shimmered under the light. Her hair was swept to one side, and her makeup was just enough to highlight her natural beauty. She looked stunning, and I told her so. "You're amazing," I said, unable to hide my admiration. "Tom won't know what hit him." She laughed, her eyes sparkling. "Wish me luck?" "You don't need it," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "You're irresistible." As she left the caravan, my chest tightened with a mix of emotions. Pride, anticipation, and a touch of nervousness swirled within me, but I reminded myself of our trust. This was part of the journey we had chosen, and I was determined to embrace it. When Stacey returned that night, the glow in her eyes was even more radiant than before. She sat beside me on the sofa, her hands clasped in her lap as she began to share her evening. "We went for a walk by the river," she said, her voice soft but full of excitement. "He talked about his life, his childhood, his dreams. He's so genuine, John. It's like there's this strength in him, not just physically but emotionally too. I nodded, hanging on her every word. And how did it feel? Incredible, she admitted, her cheeks flushing. There's something about being with him, it's exciting and new, but it doesn't take away from us. If anything, it makes me appreciate what we have even more. She went on to describe how Tom had held her hand as they walked, how he had looked at her with a mix of admiration and desire. And then, her voice dropping to a whisper, she told me about the kiss, a moment of quiet intensity by the riverbank, the city lights reflecting on the water. He kissed me like I was the only woman in the world, she said, her eyes glistening with emotion. It was breathtaking. I reached for her hand, my heart swelling with a mix of jealousy and pride. I'm so glad you enjoyed it, Stacey. Truly. Her eyes met mine, and in that moment, I knew we were on the same page. This wasn't just about her or Tom, it was about us, about exploring something new together and strengthening our bond in the process. That night, as we lay in bed, Stacey shared more details, her words painting vivid images of her evening. I listened intently, my emotions a complex tapestry of admiration, excitement, and love. She was my wife, my partner, and seeing her flourish in this way was the most incredible gift. This was only the beginning, I realized. There was so much more to explore, so much more to experience. And I couldn't wait to see where this journey would take us next. The days that followed were like a dream I couldn't wake from, a strange, intoxicating mix of reality and fantasy. Stacey had taken the first steps into a new chapter of our lives, and now the story was unfolding with a rhythm all its own. I felt like a spectator to a magnificent performance, one that was both thrilling and deeply personal. Stacey continued to see Tom, their connection growing with each encounter. And each time she returned to me, she shared everything, the words they exchanged, the way he made her laugh, the touch of his hand on hers. Her honesty was a lifeline, anchoring me to the trust we had built together. It was this openness, this willingness to share every detail, that allowed me to embrace my feelings fully. One evening, after a particularly intense show under the big top, Stacey approached me backstage. Her cheeks were flushed from her performance, her hair still damp with sweat, but her eyes were alive with excitement. Tom invited me to his caravan tonight, she said, her voice steady but tinged with anticipation. He said he'd like to spend more time together, just the two of us. I felt my stomach tighten, but it wasn't fear or jealousy, it was anticipation. I nodded, my voice calm despite the pounding of my heart. How do you feel about it? She smiled, a mix of confidence and vulnerability in her expression. I want to go. But I want you to be okay with it. I took her hand in mine, squeezing it gently. Stacey, I want you to follow your heart. I trust you completely. And if this is what you want, then I want it for you too. Her smile widened, and she leaned in to kiss me softly. Thank you, John. For everything. That evening, I stayed behind in our caravan, my thoughts racing as I imagined what was happening just a few steps away. Stacey had always been the light of my life, her beauty and grace unmatched, but now I was seeing her in a new light, one that was both exhilarating and humbling. The thought of her with Tom, their laughter and conversation turning into something deeper, sent shivers down my spine. Hours later, she returned. Her face was flushed, her hair slightly disheveled, and her smile brighter than I had ever seen it. She sat beside me on the small sofa, her hands clasped in her lap as she began to speak. It was incredible, she said, her voice soft but full of emotion. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. And then, it happened. My heart raced as I listened, hanging on her every word. He kissed me again, she continued, her cheeks flushing. And this time, it wasn't just a kiss. He held me, John, like I was the most precious thing in the world. And I let him. She paused, her eyes searching mine for any sign of doubt or discomfort. But there was none. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Tell me everything, I said, my voice steady. She nodded, her words spilling out in a rush. She told me about the way Tom had touched her, his hands strong yet gentle, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down her spine. She described the intensity of their connection, the way he had made her feel desired and cherished. And as she spoke, I felt a strange mix of emotions, jealousy, yes, but also pride and excitement. Stacey was flourishing, and it was beautiful to witness. And then, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, he asked if I wanted to stay. And I said yes. My breath caught, and I felt my pulse quicken. What happened? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated for a moment, then met my gaze. He held me, John. He kissed me, touched me. And, it was amazing. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I nodded slowly, my emotions swirling in a chaotic but exhilarating mix. I'm so glad you felt that, Stacey, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. You deserve to feel that way. Her eyes filled with tears, and she leaned in to kiss me, her lips soft and warm against mine. Thank you, she whispered. For trusting me, for loving me. That night, as we lay in bed, she told me more about the way Tom had looked at her, the way he had made her feel alive in a way she hadn't experienced before. And as I listened, I felt a strange sense of peace. This was what we had chosen together, and it was bringing us closer in ways I hadn't anticipated. Over the next few weeks, Stacey and Tom's connection continued to grow. She spent more time with him, their encounters becoming more intimate and frequent. And each time she returned to me, she shared everything, the good, the awkward, the exhilarating. Her honesty was a gift, and I cherished it. For my part, I found myself looking forward to her stories, to the way her face lit up as she recounted her time with Tom. It wasn't just about the physical connection, it was about the way she was discovering new parts of herself, the way she was embracing her desires and her confidence. And through it all, our bond remained unshaken. This wasn't just Stacey's journey, it was ours. And I was ready to see where it would lead us next. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, revelations, and connection. Each time Stacey spent an evening with Tom, she returned with stories that ignited something within me, a mixture of pride, desire, and profound admiration. I watched her grow in ways I never imagined, her confidence blooming like a flower in spring. And as her happiness deepened, so did our bond. One night, as we sat in the quiet of our caravan, she turned to me, her eyes filled with warmth and something else, an invitation. John, she began softly, I've been thinking. You've trusted me with so much, and I want to share even more with you. I want you to be part of this in a new way. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you mean? I spoke to Tom, she continued, her cheeks flushing slightly. And he's open to the idea of you being there. Not as a participant, but as an observer. If that's something you'd want. Her words hung in the air, and I felt my heart begin to race. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. To see Stacey with Tom, to witness the connection we had talked about so openly, was something I had dreamed of, but now it was real. I want that, I said finally, my voice steady. I want to see you, Stacey. To see you happy, free, and fully yourself. Her smile was radiant, and she reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. Then it's settled. Tomorrow night, we'll make it happen. The following evening, the air in the circus grounds was electric. The usual chaos of performances and rehearsals buzzed around us, but I was focused entirely on Stacey. She had chosen a stunning outfit, a silky, deep red dress that hugged her curves and shimmered under the soft glow of the caravan lights. Her hair was swept back elegantly, and her makeup highlighted her natural beauty. How do I look? She asked, spinning slowly to show off her dress. You're breathtaking, I said honestly. Tom won't be able to take his eyes off you. She laughed, a sound that sent a wave of warmth through me. And you? Are you ready for this? I've never been more ready, I replied, my voice full of conviction. Together, we walked to Tom's caravan, the night air cool against our skin. My heart pounded with every step, a mix of anticipation and nerves coursing through me. Stacey knocked softly on the door, and a moment later, it swung open to reveal Tom, his towering frame filling the doorway. He smiled warmly, his deep voice resonating as he greeted us. Come in, he said, stepping aside to let us enter. The caravan was cozy and inviting, lit by a warm glow from a small lamp. Tom had prepared a bottle of wine, and the three of us sat together, the conversation flowing easily. Despite the situation, the atmosphere was relaxed, even comforting. Stacey and Tom's chemistry was undeniable, and I found myself captivated by the way they interacted. After a while, Tom turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "John, I want to say how much I admire your openness. It takes a lot of trust and strength to support something like this." "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "It's not always easy, but seeing Stacey happy makes it all worth it." Tom nodded, his respect evident. Then, he turned his attention back to Stacey, his smile softening. "Are you ready?" Stacey glanced at me, her eyes searching mine for reassurance. I nodded, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "I'm here," I said. "Always." With that, the energy in the room shifted. Stacey stood, her movements graceful and deliberate, and walked to Tom. He rose to meet her, his massive frame dwarfing hers. Their eyes met, and in that moment, I could see the trust and connection between them. It was beautiful. What followed was a symphony of emotion and intimacy, played out before my eyes. Stacey and Tom moved together with a natural rhythm, their connection deepening with every touch, every whispered word. And I, seated quietly in the corner, was transfixed. At first, jealousy flickered at the edges of my mind, but it was quickly overwhelmed by a wave of pride and awe. Stacey was radiant, her confidence and joy shining brighter than ever. She was fully herself, unburdened and free, and it was breathtaking to witness. Throughout it all, she would glance at me, her eyes filled with love and reassurance. Those moments anchored me, reminding me that this was our journey, our story. And as I watched, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. This wasn't about losing her or sharing her with someone else. It was about celebrating her, about embracing her happiness as an extension of our own. When the evening drew to a close, Stacey and Tom shared a quiet moment, their connection evident in the way they looked at each other. Then, she turned to me, her smile soft but full of emotion. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "For trusting me. For loving me." I stood, crossing the room to her, and pulled her into my arms. "Always," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You're my everything, Stacey." We left Tom's caravan hand in hand, the cool night air wrapping around us as we walked back to our own space. There was a comfortable silence between us, filled with unspoken understanding. That night, as we lay in bed, Stacey curled up beside me, her head resting on my chest. "How do you feel?" she asked softly. I smiled, running my fingers through her hair. "Proud. Grateful. Happy." "Me too," she whispered. "I love you, John." "I love you too," I replied, holding her close. This was our story, and it was only just beginning. Together, we were rewriting the rules, forging a path that was uniquely ours. And I couldn't wait to see where it would lead us next. The days following that night felt surreal, as though the world had shifted slightly on its axis. Stacey and I were closer than ever, our bond deepened by the trust we had built and the experiences we now shared. Every glance, every touch, every whispered word carried a weight of understanding and connection that was almost indescribable. We had crossed a threshold together, stepping into a world that few dared to explore. And yet, it felt right. Not perfect, there were still moments of doubt, of emotional complexity, but undeniably ours. The foundation of our love had not only held firm, it had grown stronger. One evening, as the circus crew gathered around a fire after the show, I watched Stacey and Tom interact. Their connection was visible, but it wasn't something that overshadowed what Stacey and I shared. It was simply another facet of who she was, and I loved her all the more for it. Tom, for his part, had become a quiet but steady presence in our lives. He respected our boundaries and approached the situation with a level of thoughtfulness that I hadn't expected. He often sought my input, ensuring that I felt comfortable and included, and I couldn't help but appreciate his sincerity. But the real revelation was Stacey. She was glowing, her confidence unshakable, her spirit unrestrained. She moved through the world with an ease that was intoxicating, and I found myself falling in love with her all over again. One quiet night, as we lay in bed, Stacey turned to me, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the moonlight streaming through the window. "John," she began, her voice soft but steady, "how do you feel about everything?" "About us?" I took a moment to gather my thoughts, wanting to articulate the depth of my emotions. I feel like I've discovered a new part of myself, I said finally. It's not always easy, but it's worth it. Seeing you so happy, so alive, it's everything I could have hoped for. Her eyes shimmered with emotion. I never imagined we'd come this far. But I'm so grateful for you, for your trust and your love. I reached for her hand, threading my fingers through hers. I'm grateful for you, Stacey. For your courage, your honesty. This isn't just your journey, it's ours. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. She smiled, her gaze filled with warmth. There's something freeing about knowing we can define our relationship on our terms. No rules but our own. Exactly, I said. And as long as we're honest with each other, we can handle anything. She leaned in, her lips brushing mine in a kiss that was both tender and electric. I love you, John. I love you too, I replied, pulling her close. The next night, we found ourselves in a moment I never thought possible. Stacey had suggested we all share dinner together, her, Tom, and me. At first, I had been hesitant, unsure of how I would navigate the dynamic. But as the three of us sat around the table, sharing stories and laughter, I realized how far we had come. Tom was respectful, his admiration for Stacey evident but never overstepping. And Stacey, for her part, moved effortlessly between us, her love for me shining through in every glance, every touch of her hand on mine. It was a delicate balance, but one that felt natural in its own way. After dinner, Tom excused himself, leaving Stacey and me alone under the canopy of stars. She rested her head on my shoulder, her voice a soft whisper in the quiet night. Are you happy, John? She asked. More than I ever thought I could be, I replied honestly. What we've created, it's more than I ever dreamed of. She smiled, her fingers tracing patterns on my arm. I feel the same. I never imagined we could have this kind of connection, this kind of freedom. But it feels so right. It does, I agreed. And I know there will be challenges, moments where it's not easy. But as long as we face them together, I know we'll be okay. She nodded, her gaze thoughtful. What do you think comes next? I considered her question for a moment, then smiled. Whatever we want. That's the beauty of this, Stacey. We get to write our own story. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Stacey and I continued to navigate our unique journey. There were moments of joy, moments of doubt, and moments of pure, unfiltered love. But through it all, we remained steadfast in our commitment to each other. The circus moved from town to town, the rhythm of performances and travel becoming a comforting constant. But no matter where we went, our connection remained unshaken. Stacey and I had built something rare, something that defied convention but was undeniably ours. Looking back, I realized how much I had grown not just as a husband, but as a person. I had learned to let go of jealousy, to embrace vulnerability, and to trust in the strength of our bond. Stacey's happiness was my happiness, and her freedom was my freedom. Together, we had created a relationship that was as unique as the circus itself, a delicate dance of love, trust, and shared adventure. And as we stood hand in hand, watching the lights of the big top illuminate the night sky, I knew one thing for certain: this was just the beginning. Our story was still unfolding, and I couldn't wait to see where it would take us next.